I moved to the sprawling, isolated observatory campus when I was 10 years old. My dad, a lead astrophysicist, had taken a new position, and suddenly, my world was reduced to vast desert landscapes and the hum of scientific equipment. I didn't know a soul, save for the family my dad had befriended, a single mother who managed the campus's small general store and her 3 kids. Fortunately, there was a girl 2 years my senior. She was 12 when we first met. Over the next couple of years, we slowly became acquainted. We weren't close, but fate, or perhaps the limited social circle of the observatory, led us to share the same small group of friends. One crisp, starlit evening, my friend Leo was hanging out with her and her younger brother. They were alone in their family's on-campus residence. Their mother was working a late shift at the store. Her mother, it turned out, had been assisting a new vendor who supplied rare minerals for the observatory's research. Through their conversations, she'd learned that the vendor's sister, a woman named Delilah, had recently been released from a long-term psychiatric facility. That night, as Leo chatted with my friend, a sharp rap echoed at the door. My friend, assuming it was her mother, she had a distinct, rhythmic knock when she returned, answered without a second thought. Leo, who wasn't supposed to be there after hours, immediately bolted through the back window, sprinting towards his own dorm down the gravel path. He never looked back, never considered the possibility that it wasn't her mother. It wasn't. It was Delilah, the vendor's sister. She had pieced together their family's whereabouts and her mother's work schedule from fragmented conversations with her sister. She walked in. This is where the details become murky, and truthfully, I'm grateful for that. My friend's younger brother, quick-thinking and terrified, managed to slip out and sprint to the nearest security outpost to call for help. But it was too late for my friend. Delilah brutally murdered her a week before the annual winter solstice celebration. My friend was found decapitated, her body left in the frigid, empty water tank behind their home. Delilah had even taken her head. The security teams had to search tirelessly through the campus's various storage units and abandoned structures before they found it. I wasn't allowed to attend her memorial. This chilling incident echoed a story my wife's grandmother often recounted, a harrowing experience she endured about 15 years ago, back when my wife and I were still dating. Her husband had passed away just a year prior, and she'd begun volunteering at the community library in the nearby town, a way to stay active and social. It was deep winter, and the library closed at 5, leaving her walk home cloaked in the early evening darkness. On this particular night, she'd politely declined a ride from another volunteer, insisting she needed the exercise to keep her spry. Her house was about a mile away, nestled at the edge of a lightly wooded area just outside of El Paso, Texas. About halfway home, she noticed him, a figure walking in the same direction, steadily gaining on her. In itself, not entirely unusual. She was an older woman, not particularly fast. But there was something vaguely sinister about his gait, a subtle shift in his posture that sent a shiver down her spine. They kept walking, the distance between them shrinking. Soon he was directly behind her. Then he matched her pace, simply staying there, a silent, unnerving presence. Now she knew something was profoundly wrong, but she was almost home. She could see the top of her driveway, faintly illuminated by the porch light she always left on, a silent sentinel meant to suggest someone was always home. She just needed to make it another 150 yards, then 100. All that time, she said, he was so close she could feel his breath on her neck. Around 50 yards from her doorstep, it happened. A strong hand clamped down on her shoulder. "Okay," a low, gruff voice commanded, "don't turn around. Hand over your purse or I'll cut you." She paused for a split second, then took one decisive step forward, spun around and fired. The .38 revolver she always carried in her purse barked, a sharp retort in the quiet night, and the man crumpled, clutching his neck. He spent the next 5 years in a prison hospital before succumbing to complications from the wound. My wife's grandmother passed away last year, but to her dying day, she lamented that she'd pulled the trigger a moment too soon. When I was young, somewhere between 8 and 11 years old, my sister, 7 years my senior, would babysit my brother and me whenever our parents were out. At that time, she smoked heavily, and of course my parents made her smoke outside. So, I'd often follow her out, playing around, annoying her as younger siblings do. One afternoon, my sister noticed a car at the end of our long, winding driveway. It was just sitting there on the quiet, tree-lined road. A white SUV with a bike rack on top. It had the most intensely tinted windows I had ever seen. You couldn't see anything inside from any angle. It sat there, unmoving, until she went back inside. Then it would slowly drive to the end of the road, turn into the small church parking lot across from our house, and wait. It would wait until she emerged again for another cigarette, and then the peculiar routine would repeat. It was odd, certainly, but my sister is a brave woman and she largely ignored it. That is, until the very next day. My parents were out again and the SUV reappeared. It would sit at the end of the driveway just watching. I don't know what the driver was doing, but he was watching my sister. I know because if I didn't go out with her, I'd watch from the front window. It would simply sit there, observing her. She eventually told our father, who, as a lead astrophysicist on campus, had some pull with campus security. He called them and made a complaint. They showed up, surveyed the area, but the white SUV was nowhere to be seen. Months went by and nothing. Then, one day, a good 9 months after this whole ordeal had begun, and about 4 months since the last sighting, it was back. It became a regular occurrence. Another day, my sister was outside indulging in her nasty habit, and sure enough, here it came. This time we were all alone as usual. She decided she'd had enough. She told me to stay in the enclosed courtyard while she went to confront them. She started walking towards the SUV, and halfway down the driveway she would later remark to us, "I felt a terror. Like I knew if I went any further I was dead." She was paralyzed by pure fear. She turned around and went inside. Finally, the family space rover was in the repair bay for some kind of issue, so we were all stuck home for the night. While my parents were home, my sister went outside to smoke. I went outside with her. Eventually the SUV showed up. She told me to run inside and tell our father, and I did. My dad promptly grabbed his emergency flare gun and started briskly walking down the driveway, flare gun in hand, pointed towards the ground in the direction of the SUV, but not leveled at it. The SUV floored it, kicking up dust and gravel, and peeled out onto the nearby orbital highway. My dad, ever the meticulous scientist, noted the year, model, and any distinguishing features. The scariest thing? The license plate had been completely covered in duct tape. We never saw it again. I was just 4 or 5 years old and my parents had recently separated. My mom was living in a compact 2-bedroom habitat module on the lower levels of the research station. I had my own room, but I preferred to sleep in her bed whenever I was staying with her. Our 2 bedrooms were at the end of a short corridor, directly across from each other. Our habitat module was on the first floor, and I remember it was the middle of the simulated summer cycle. My mom had a ventilation grate open in her room, which was directly above the headboard of her bed. Anyway, I woke up in the middle of the night and remember sitting up and seeing that our cat, Nebula, was sitting in the doorframe of my mom's room. I should note, her door was ajar and you could partially see into my bedroom. This was strange because Nebula was typically always curled up in bed with us. As I was watching him, he walked into my bedroom and meowed. I turned to face my mom and woke her up. In the 3 or 4 seconds it took me to rouse her and for her to ask me what was wrong, we both looked back up at the doorframe. There was a man standing by my open door, making his way out of the bedroom. I still don't know how she managed to do it so quickly, but my mother proceeded to pick me up and literally throw me out of the emergency escape hatch. She quickly followed and we were able to start screaming for help. Someone immediately activated the station's distress beacon. Security personnel arrived swiftly but found no signs of forced entry, only that our main access panel was unlocked, which led them to believe the man must have exited that way. The strange thing was that my mom swore, up and down, that she had locked the door that night with both the manual override and the biometric seal. About a week later, she was cleaning the kitchen unit and opened up our utility closet. There, she found a small data pad with names and crude schematics, as well as a pair of maintenance gloves and some discarded nutrient bar wrappers. Security was called again, but all they could do was speculate that the man had been in our habitat module and had hidden until we were asleep. One day, while doing my laundry in the communal hydrofiltration room, one of the energy-efficient lights flickered and died in the adjacent storage bay. The hydrofiltration room is set up so that the laundry section is separated from the other side of the basement with a partition wall and a sliding door. In order to get upstairs to the main living quarters, you have to exit the laundry room and go through the other part of the basement. So, the light blew in the storage bay, not the laundry room. As it was the only light on that side, it was pretty dark. I finished the laundry. I had to do while dreading the walk through the dark, isolated storage bay. I exited the hydrofiltration room, got halfway through the bay, and then I heard a loud cackle. Imagine the sound people make when they imitate a witch, then imagine that witch had been chain-smoking for 50 years, making her voice deeper and hoarser. That's what I heard, clear as day, right behind me. I didn't hesitate to bolt for the stairs. I waited until my father got home, and then he changed the faulty illumination panel. I have yet to hear that cackle since, and I've not told a single person in the habitat module about it. This happened to a friend of mine. She told me about it about a year or so ago. We'll call her Minji. Minji is in her early 20s and works as a xenolinguistics tutor at the Interstellar Exchange Program in the bustling market district of Neo-Seoul. One evening a few years ago, she was tutoring a high school boy, a promising young diplomat. They were studying pretty late, and the maglev train system had stopped running for the night. Being a long way from his family's living quarters in the outer sectors, the boy asked if he could crash on her floor overnight and get the first maglev in the morning. Minji was very reluctant. Inviting a teenage male student to stay the night didn't sound like a great idea, but he was begging her, and eventually she relented. They went back into her one-room apartment. She climbed into her suspended bed, while he laid a thermal blanket out on the floor. They both fell asleep. A few hours later, at maybe 2 a.m., the boy wakes Minji up. "I'm really hungry," he says. "Let's go get some nutrient paste." Minji opens her eyes and looks up at him in disbelief. "Food? No. It's 2 a.m. Go back to sleep." But the student insists. "No, I'm so hungry. Let's eat something now." She tells him that there's some concentrated nutrient paste in the auto dispenser in the kitchen unit, and he could fix himself some. This doesn't satisfy him. He doesn't want nutrient paste. There's a 24-hour synth food stall just down the street. Let's go there. Eventually, after several minutes of persuasion, the boy gets Minji to come with him to the synth food stall. They leave the apartment and head out. As soon as they're on the street, the boy turns to Minji and says, "I'm not hungry." Minji looks at him, confused. The boy's eyes dart around. "I woke up in the middle of the night and looked under your bed. There's a man sleeping there." They immediately contacted sector security. Officers discovered that a displaced individual had been living in Minji's apartment, sleeping under her bed, for 2 months. The boy only saw him because he was lying on the floor, so he had a clear view under the bed. I was navigating a shortcut from the desolate mining colony of Red Sands on Mars to the sprawling orbital station of Elysium Citadel. Red Sands is located in the high desert plains of the southern hemisphere, and the shortcut was all 2-lane lunar buggy tracks through total nothingness, except for passing through Dust Bowl, a nearly abandoned former excavation site, nearly as far below sea level as the Valles Marineris. So, I was driving my lunar buggy by myself in the afternoon and proceeded to drive up into the Martian mountain range between Dust Bowl and the main supply route, M40. Once I reached the top, I was driving north through a canyon with high red Martian grass on both sides of the road. Up ahead, I saw some debris in the middle of the road. As I approached, I slowed down to see a modified red transport rover stopped sideways across both lanes. A supply crate was open with tools and equipment scattered everywhere, and 2 figures lay face down in the red dust of the road, a man and a woman. I stopped 100 feet or so away, and the fine hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Being a former colonial marine, I reached under the seat and pulled out my energy pistol, chambering a power cell. Something seemed very wrong. It looked too perfect, as if it were staged for an ambush. Something was just off. As I scanned the road, I saw a clear line. I could drive past the man on the road to his left, swerve to the right of the woman behind the rover, and I'd be on the other side. I dropped the buggy into first gear, punched it down, and drove the line I'd planned. I passed the back of the rover without hitting it or either of the figures in the road. I continued forward a couple of 100 feet and slowed down so I could breathe and let my heart rate normalize. As I looked up into the rearview screen, I saw that the 2 figures had gotten up to their knees, and 20 or so people emerged from the tall Martian grass on either side of the road by the rover and the bodies. At that moment, my right foot smashed the accelerator pedal to the floor and did not let up until I had to slow down for the M40 East on-ramp. I will never know what would have happened to me had I gotten out of the buggy to check on the bodies or stopped my buggy closer to them. Some friends and I were doing some night fishing on the Styx River, a slow-moving, heavily polluted river that wound through the industrial outskirts of the megacity. We were sitting along the shoreline with a nice bioluminescent fire going, accompanied by the usual idle talk and a few synth beers, when suddenly everyone just stopped talking. It was like a switch was flipped off. We were all staring across the murky river, and we felt as if something or someone was staring back. It was a very uneasy feeling, to which some of the group tried to shake off with typical macho humor. Then, a blood-curdling sound erupted from the other shore that froze everyone in their tracks. The sound was unlike any other that I had ever heard, and it made every hair on my body vibrate and tingle. The only way I could describe it is it sounded like a wild, feral creature with no language skills being gutted alive. No words, just this high-pitched, blood-curdling scream. Nobody moved or said a word. We all just sat there, fixed in our stare, when just as suddenly, a second scream was let loose with even more force than the first. By this time, several of us were sprinting to our all-terrain vehicles that were parked a few yards away, retrieving various energy rifles and plasma cutters. When we got back, we all sat there quietly, our eyes fixed, staring toward the opposite shore, watching the light from our bioluminescent fire reflecting off the jagged alien rocks. We sat there, waiting for another scream or something to move on the other side of the river. Finally, a third scream came just as suddenly, but this time it was on our side of the river, coming from the alien flora about a yard away. We all hightailed out of there, leaving most of our gear behind. When we got to our vehicles, we heard the scream one more time just beyond the tree line. We all floored it, getting the hell away from there, and never found out what was making the sounds. It was a Friday night, and my friend was picking me up in his hover car from my hab unit. I was in a hurry since we were running late for the 0G sports match in the city. The whole ride there, we were having such a good time that I hadn't even noticed I didn't have my personal comm device. I searched the hover car seat, the floor, but it wasn't in the car. I was sure that I had just forgotten it. During the 0G match, I couldn't stop worrying that maybe I had dropped my comm device somewhere. So, I borrowed my friend's comm device and ran to the hygiene station. I dialed my home number and hoped someone at my hab unit would pick up. It took 3 rings before somebody picked up, but they remained silent on the other end. I yelled into the comm device that I was just checking if I'd left my comm device at home. They didn't answer. I assumed it was my little brother just messing with me, so I hung up. I got home late that night to see that my parents weren't home. I got inside my hab unit and called them to see where they were. They told me that they had gone out to eat at the communal mess hall and see a holographic concert at the Central Dome with my little brother. They said they left soon after I had for the game, and they should be home in around half an hour. So, I hung up and proceeded to look for my comm device. But then I realized, how could somebody in my family have picked up my comm device if they hadn't been home? I felt a pain in my stomach as raw fear swept over me. It was at that moment that I heard the back access panel to my hab unit open and close. I immediately jolted out the front airlock to the neighbor's unit and called station security. Apparently, the back access panel was left open, and somebody had simply walked into our hab unit. Nothing was stolen, but the scariest thing is the thought that we could have fallen asleep with a stranger in the house. A while back, there was a family that moved into the hab unit next door to my family. They had a son who was just twisted. He was obsessive over old world, slasher Holovids and always wanted me to talk about things that happened during my time serving in the colonial wars that no normal person would want to hear. He also loved tormenting stray xenofauna. This guy was a whack job. He was 19 at the time and my daughter was 7, but he always wanted to talk to her. He'd strike up conversations with her when she walked home from the children's academy. He would talk over the internal fence at her when she was playing in the back courtyard. But what really set me off was when he called our hab unit looking to speak to her. That was it. I went over and flipped at him and his parents, telling him to stay the hell away from her, and I'd better not ever see him again. That's when things got weird. My daughter was always a little imaginative and paranoid. She would think there were shadow beasts under her bed and whatnot. So, when she told me there was something living in her closet and she was too scared to get up and tell us at night, but it wasn't there in the daytime, we blew it off as no big deal. A few weeks went by, and one night, my wife and daughter were staying at my mother's hab unit for a girls' night. So, I turned on the Old World Entertainment console and watched some classic Holovids, eventually falling asleep downstairs in the main living area. At around 2 a.m., I get a call from my neighbor with the creepy son, telling me something along the lines of, "We saw that you were up." So we called. Our son is missing. I went by his room to use the refresher, and his door was open, which is unusual, and there was no sign of him. We need help looking for him. The comm call woke me up, though I wasn't up. So I asked why they thought I was. "Oh, he saw you walking around upstairs and the light is on." My blood ran cold. His eyes. I'd been passed out on the couch, and I knew no one had turned any lights on. I hung up on them, ran outside to my heavy-duty work rover to grab my combat shotgun, but noticed station security pulling up to my neighbor's hab unit. By this point, I booked it over and told them there was someone in my hab unit, and now I could see the lights in my daughter's room were on, and there was a silhouette pacing back and forth. When the security deputies went in, they found the neighbor's son. He was there, waiting in my daughter's room with a nice little setup in her closet. He said he likes to watch her sleep in the moonlight, as he called the dim, filtered light from the orbital station's central dome.